Hello everybody, welcome to my Sky Diary for October 2020, where I'm going to give you a run through of the views that we're going to get of the night sky, the planets and everything else throughout the month of October. So looking firstly at the moon, you can see it's going to be really bright at the beginning of the month when it's a full moon around about the 3rd or 4th of October, and then we get to new moon around about the 17th, 18th of October. So this is when you're going to get really good views of all the deep sky stuff, all the really faint stuff when the moon's out of the way. So we're not going to see the moon, and its brightness isn't going to affect everything that you can see. So let's have a look at what stars we're going to see throughout the month. So this is the view looking south at about 10 p.m. 15th of October. And you can see there's a number of constellations visible out there, and there's also 3 planets there as well. In fact, there's more, but we'll come to those later. So looking up here, we've got the square of Pegasus. So this is a square of Pegasus, the winged horse. It's up, flying upside down. Here's the head, and here's the front legs. Got Cetus, the whale or the sea monster, over here. Not many people really know that one because it's quite an indistinct constellation, not really that many bright stars. Aquarius, the water carrier, is over here. This is a little asterism, a pattern of stars called the water jar. And then you've got Capricornus, again not a very distinct constellation. And then over towards the southwest, getting quite low now, is Aquila. And you've got Delphinus and Sagitta as well, but they're probably hidden behind me, I guess. And then over here you've got Pisces. So here's one of the fish, the other fish is up here, and then this is a ribbon that connects the 2 fish together. And then nestled in there you've got Mars. There's Mars, the planet, which is coming to opposition this month. I'll talk about that in a little while. So this is the view looking north about 10 o'clock on the same night, the 15th of October. And these are what we call the Circumpolar Stars. These are stars that never set because we're so far north that they go round and round the pole and never really set. So anything higher in the sky than that never sets from our location. And of course, right down in the south, or should I say right down in the north, we've got this distinct 7 pattern of stars called the Plow. In the UK, the Americans call this the Big Dipper. And that's a very distinct pattern of stars that we can always pick out at any time of the year. And if you take these 2 stars, Dubhe and Merak, they're known as the pointers, because if you join those 2 up and draw a line almost in that direction, they point towards Polaris, the pole star. And because that's situated almost directly above the North Pole of the Earth, it's about half a degree off. That seems to stay in the same place in the sky all the time. So everything in the sky rotates around that point because of the Earth's rotation. It's nothing to do with the sky stays still, it's the Earth that's rotating underneath the sky. And of course that's part of Ursa Minor, the little bear, whereas the Plow is Ursa Major, the great bear. And then meandering in between the 2 is the body of Draco, the dragon. This is an asterism of stars called the lozenge, which is the head of the dragon. You've got the constellation of Cepheus here, the king, and Lynx, which again is very indistinct, just below Ursa Major. We're not going to talk about many more stars in that direction, but if we look directly overhead, this is a point called the Zenith. So it's directly overhead. We see some more circumpolar constellations, and these are stars passing at the highest point across the sky. So we've got Pegasus here, Cygnus, Lyra, and Aquila a little bit lower in the sky, Delphinus and Sagitta, which you couldn't see in the last slide. And then Draco is just up here. You've got Cassiopeia, the Queen, this W shape, which is very distinct. And again, it's a circumpolar constellation, so that never sets as seen from the UK. So we can see that all year round again. And next to her we've got Cepheus again, and then Andromeda here. And Lacerta, very indistinct constellation of the Lizard. And then if we look towards the west, these are the stars that are setting. So these are the stars that are going to soon be lost from view. So here's Deneb in Cygnus, the Swan. There's Vega in Lyra, the Lyre. And here's Altair in Aquila. And they make up what we call the Summer Triangle. And that's going to be with us for quite a little bit of time yet. So although they're known as the Summer Triangle, they're actually visible for quite a long time into the autumn and early winter. So keep an eye out for them. And of course, you can see that the Milky Way travels across through those constellations really, really nicely. And if you've got a really dark sky, you may be able to see this dark rift of this dark absorbing material within the Milky Way. So Cygnus, Lyra, and Aquila. And then you've also got Draco over here to the right, which we've met a little while ago. Hercules a little bit further down in the sky, which has got the fantastic globular cluster Messier 13, which we'll talk about another time. And then if we look towards the east, these are the stars that are coming up. They're starting to rise. So the winter stars, as you can see, are on their way. So we've got Pisces here with Mars in it as well, remember. Also got Andromeda just over here, and Pegasus is just behind me in the corner. Triangulum, which has got a lovely galaxy, a lovely face-on galaxy about here, because Andromeda galaxy is just here. So there's two galaxies really, really close to each other. So you've got the Triangulum galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy fairly close to each other. Cetus, Perseus, the hero, Aries, the ram, Taurus, the bull, one of the winter constellations, and Auriga with the bright star Capella within it as well. So let's start looking at the planets. Here's Mercury, where it is on the 1st of October. So you can see it's quite a distance away from the Sun, and it's actually at greatest eastern elongation, which means that it's furthest from the Sun, and that's about 26 degrees at that particular time. Unfortunately, because of the angle of the ecliptic in the evening sky, it's visible in the evening because it's an eastern elongation. Although it is visible, it is so low once the sun starts to set that by the time the sky gets dark enough for you to be able to see it, it's going to have set. So we're not going to be able to see it this time around. So save that for later in the year. Because by the 25th of October, it reaches what we call inferior conjunction, which is the position almost between us and the sun. It might be just slightly above or slightly below. I haven't checked the exact circumstances yet. But during that time, it's so close to the sun, it's really, really dangerous to see if you can try and find it. So, yeah, so we're not going to really see Mercury throughout the month of October. But one of the planets we really can see, you have to get up really early in the morning, is Venus. You can't miss it if you get up just before it starts to get light. It's visible in the morning eastern sky, so look east and see if you can see it a little while before the sky starts to get bright. There's Venus. You can't really miss it. It's like a shining beacon in the night sky. 1st of October, Jupiter and Saturn. If you go out about 8 o'clock, just after it gets really dark, you might just be able to see these two bright stars in the south at their highest at that point. The brighter one is Jupiter, and the one to the left is Saturn, and they're absolutely fantastic. So you can see Jupiter is in the constellation of Sagittarius. So here's the teapot, there's the lid, the spout is just hidden over here. There's the body of the teapot, and here's the handle as well, and of course the Milky Way steam coming out of the spout. And Saturn is making its way towards Capricornus. In fact, Jupiter's making its way towards Capricornus, and it's going to overtake Saturn later in the year, and I'll talk about that as we come to December. So Jupiter was at opposition on the 14th of July. It's now past its best, but it's still really big and still really bright, and you can still see some nice detail on it. So here's a picture taken in September, where you can see some of the cloud structure. This is one taken in August where you can see the red spot. So have a look out for some red spot transits. Look online to see when the times of the red spot are going to be visible, so you can see it right in the middle of the disk, because it looks really impressive when you see that red spot. And then you might also be able to see at certain points these dark spots moving across the face of Jupiter. You do need a telescope to be able to see these, but they are actually shadow transits of the satellites, the 4 Galilean satellites that Galileo discovered all those years ago, and they could cast shadows that go across the cloud tops of Jupiter's disk, and you can see those going across as well. You can also see the satellites transit as well, but they are far more difficult to see because the contrast in brightness between the planet and the satellites is much more difficult to see than the shadows. And here's a picture of Jupiter and some of its moons. So Io, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto. Callisto is probably hidden behind me, but there you go. But they are named in order from the planet. So Io, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto. But they don't always look at the distances they are because they're orbiting around Jupiter, and so they look different distances from it at different times. But just a pair of binoculars, you can see those 4 moons. You might not see all 4 at the same time. You might see 3 or 2, but you certainly can see 4 of them quite easily. They look like tiny stars, but they are actually moons going around Jupiter. And if you've got a really dark sight, you might be able to see Jupiter and Saturn. Here they are. This was taken a few weeks ago when we were down in Dorset for a little quick break, and you can see the Milky Way quite nicely. Here's Aquila here, this is Cygnus up here, and here's Lyra, and you can see this dark dust rift in the Milky Way, Jupiter and Saturn, and you can even see the light of Jupiter making a glitter path on the surface of the sea. So if you've got a really dark sight, get out and have a look before they disappear, because they're getting lower and lower each evening. And here again is the Milky Way, here's Jupiter and Saturn shown a little bit close up, and here's Jupiter's light being reflected on the surface of the sea. And in fact you can see the Milky Way is reflecting some light on the sea in that image as well. So get out to a dark site and see if you can see that Milky Way and see the planets just nestled to the left of it. Okay, Saturn was at opposition on the 20th of July, so again it's past its best, but it's still looking really nice because it is quite big. Even though the distance between the Earth and Saturn is getting bigger, it still is big enough to enjoy, and you can see those rings. Here they are. This is a picture I took on a couple of years ago in 2018. You can see the rings going around, and you can actually see they're sticking out above the top of the disk of Saturn. But if you have a look at an image I took in April of this year, you can see that the rings are actually fallen back a little bit, so they're starting to close up. So every so often, over 11 years, the rings close up and then open up the other way. So they're actually starting to close up now, and in a few years time they will actually be edge on, so that'd be quite interesting to watch. So this is another image I took on the 7th of August, and this is a better image that I took on the 20th of September, showing the Cassini division, the rings beautifully, the A and B ring, and some cloud belts on Saturn's disk as well. And you can see this is after opposition, so the shadow of Saturn is actually cutting off the rings, so they look like they just cut off into space, but still looking really nice. And you know, a small telescope will show you the rings. It won't show as much detail, but you will be able to see the rings in a small telescope. And if you're really good and you've got a good telescope and can see through all the smog and horrible atmosphere, you might just be able to see Titan, the brightest moon, but there are some fainter moons around Saturn as well, and this is an image I took a few years ago showing some of those satellites. Of course, this month is the opposition of Mars. Now, Mars comes to opposition every 2 years, so the last time it came to opposition was in 2018. That year it was quite low down where Jupiter and Saturn are at the moment. And so it was really difficult to see due to this turbulent atmosphere. The disk was quite big, but we couldn't see it very well. Added to that, there was a huge dust storm that obliterated the surface completely, so observers, even from the southern hemisphere, couldn't see the surface. That doesn't look like that's happening this year, so we should get some good views. In fact, we already have got some good views. So this slide here shows the path of Mars as it has done over the last few months. So the first arrow shows where it was on the 1st of August. And you can see as it gets to the 18th of August, it actually starts to slow down. So by the beginning of September, it's really started to slow down. And then on the 10th of September, it actually stops and reverse direction. This is because the Earth moving faster in its nearer orbit to the Sun. Because it's moving faster, it's overtaking Mars in its orbit. So Mars appears to go backwards. So it's the effect of the Earth's orbit and its movement superimposed onto Mars's movement. And of course, that was one thing that the ancients couldn't quite get their head around, because they thought that the Earth stood still. We now know it's moving, so that it causes Mars to behave strangely, and all the outer planets, of course. And then by the 1st of October, it had doubled back on itself quite a way. And then on the 13th of October, that's where it is at opposition in the constellation of Pisces. So this is the ribbon of Pisces holding the two fish together. And then by the 1st of November, it had moved on a little bit, starts to slow down. And then the 14th of November, 1st of December, 15th of December, and then Christmas Day, it's by this little cluster of galaxies here. And then by the end of the year, that's where it ends up. So it's at its biggest and brightest coming up now. And I'll tell you a bit more about that now. So here it is on the 13th of October when it's at opposition. So here it is, here's Mars. And it's actually just under this ribbon of Pisces. You can see here's one fish, here's the ribbon holding the two together, and here's the other fish there. This is an asterism or pattern of stars called the circlet within Pisces itself. So there's Mars, and that's in Pisces. And it's going to be a magnitude minus 2.6 sky. It's really, really bright. It's brighter than any of the other stars in the sky. Jupiter will probably look brighter, but Mars will be the brightest star in the sky once it gets really dark and Jupiter's started to set, until Venus starts rising in the early hours of the morning, of course. And this is what it looked like in July 2018. So it's quite a big disk. Although it's not quite as near to the Earth, this apparition, as it was 2 years ago, it's actually not that far away. So you can see that the disk isn't that much smaller. So we are starting to get some really nice views of the surface. But it's actually nearest to the Earth on the 6th of October. So that's when it's going to be at its biggest and best for us to observe. So let's have a look at the opposition of Mars itself and what effect that has on how we view the planet. So here it was at the beginning of the year. This is an image I took on the 7th of April. And you can see since January when I took this image how much bigger it's got. But it was still really, really small. So it was really difficult to capture features. And in fact, when I took that, it was quite low to the horizon as well. So I didn't really give myself the best chance to get anything. But I had a go anyway. But of course, as the distance between Earth and Mars gets smaller and smaller, Mars will appear bigger. And so by May and June, you can see just how much bigger it is compared to what it was in April. July and August, it's now getting quite big. So that was my next opportunity to actually capture the planet. And you could see the southern hemisphere of Mars has got this polar cap on it. And you can see some dark features as well. So I was starting to get some nice images back in August. So by September, it's now getting really, really big. So here's an image I took on the 14th of September where my technique is getting a bit better. And you can see some really nice detailed markings on the planet at that point. And here we are. So here's that same image. You can see it's a little bit pixelated. I don't mind showing you that. There are plenty who won't, but I don't mind showing you that. So let's just have a look. So on this side, I'm going to leave this image as it is and just take this image and point out a few features. You've got the shrinking southern polar cap, because the polar cap is actually pointing towards the sun, so therefore it's summertime. And so that's been gradually shrinking. And some images have actually shown that there's like a crack within that. So that's been quite nice to see their images and see what they've managed to capture. I've managed to get the really dark markings really, really nicely. This is one called Terra Serenum, but there are plenty of others I could name, but I'd have to look them up because I don't know the names of all those features. There's a hazy polar clouds as well. So this bluey colour here is actually clouds at the north polar cap. So that's quite nice to capture that. But amongst these dark markings, this little splodge here, that's Valles Marineris. So this is this huge canyon that the Mariner probe found 30 years or more ago. And that is a huge canyon, like the Grand Canyon, but it's much, much bigger. If this canyon was on the Earth, it would stretch all the way across Europe. So it's absolutely huge. So the Grand Canyon's got nothing on this one. Of course, Mars has got a few more bigger and best than the Earth has. Of course, one of those is Olympus Mons. This is an absolutely huge shield volcano. So this bright splodge here is actually Olympus Mons. So from my back garden, I can capture a splodge that is Olympus Mons, a volcano on another planet. How amazing is that? And then if you see these three bright spots here, they're actually volcanoes. They're smaller than Olympus Mons, but these are three small volcanoes. Well, they're actually quite huge, really, but in my image scale, they look quite small. So they are these Tharsis volcanoes on the surface of Mars. So there's plenty to get out and have a look. So if you've got a telescope, get out and have a look at Mars, because it's looking absolutely fantastic. So what's going to happen once it passes opposition? Of course, as the distance between Earth and Mars decreases, it's going to start getting smaller. So by the end of the year, you can see just how small it's going to get. Now, a good tip with observing Mars is, because its rotation is very similar to the Earth's, don't go out and observe Mars at the same time on successive nights. If you get a clear successive night, that is, of course, because you will see more or less the same feature just slightly later come across the field of view. So, you know, if you do get out there and get a clear night, make the most of a long session, because while you're out there, you'll see new features coming into view as Mars rotates in front of you. And then next year, 7th of October, it's going to take that long for it to reach solar conjunction. So it's going to be around for a long, long time. But because it's getting smaller, the images aren't going to be anywhere as good as they are going to be for the next few weeks. So get out there, make the most of observing it, make the most of getting out an image in it if you can, and just enjoy Mars while it's around, because it's going to be another 2 years before it's at its best again, and then it's not going to be quite as big as it is this year. So make the most of it. The biggest challenge, of course, are its moons. I've tried for these many a time, and they're a real struggle. They're called Phobos and Deimos, and their names mean fear and panic. They were discovered in 1877 by an American astronomer called Asaph Hall. Now, Phobos is about 11th magnitude, just brighter than 11th magnitude, so it's not actually that faint. The trouble is, it lies very close to Mars. Deimos is about 12th magnitude, which again is faint, but it's not that faint. So I should be able to pick those up really, really easily with my telescope. The trouble is, because they lie so close to Mars, and you can see in this view, this is on the 6th of October at midnight, when it's at the closest to Earth. You can see Deimos is really, really close to Mars. So it's going to be really difficult to get Deimos because Mars is so much brighter, and it will swamp poor little Deimos in the glare. And Phobos is a bit further away, so we might have a chance in actually capturing that if we're careful. Here's a picture taken by Martin Ratcliffe over in the US, and he's captured Mars here, and you can see he's superimposed an image of Mars to show what Mars actually looks like. But this is the glare of Mars in the really overexposed image, so you can see Mars's glare is just filled the whole field of view almost with brightness. But just here is a little brighter splodge, which is Phobos. So that's an absolutely fantastic capture from Martin there, capturing Phobos not that far from Mars. And another chance of doing that is on the 13th of October, when Phobos this time will be near to Mars, and then Deimos will be a lot further away. So that's your best chance of catching Deimos if you're able to with a camera. So get out there and give it a go. You just never know till you try. Okay, let's have a look at some more events throughout the month. So 3rd of October, Venus is going to be very close to Regulus. This is the sickle of Leo in the constellation of Leo the Lion, and there's a bright star called Regulus there, and Venus is going to be really close to that on the morning of the 3rd of October. On the 8th of October, Mare Orientale will be visible. So this is Mare Orientale, which is huge bullseye shape, and it's where a meteorite hit the surface of the moon and created this huge impact feature. The trouble is we don't get a good view of this. So here's the sort of view we get. So you can see here that this is Mare Orientale. So this dark squiggle here corresponds to this dark squiggle here. So that's about the best view we get of it. But the moon sort of wobbles in its orbit a little bit. So we sometimes look around the edge and sometimes look. So sometimes we look around the edge and sometimes it's pulled away. And occasionally certain bits get brought into view, and the 8th of October is one of those times when we can see Mare Orientale, the eastern sea, much easier. So here you can see a different image that I took, and you can see how much further it's actually leaned in, so we can see a little bit more beyond that squiggle there. We can see the Rook Mountains quite nicely coming up into view, and this is a much better image I took of it a little while later. But you can see the libration on that particular night wasn't quite as good as it was on this one, but not far off. So there are favourable librations this year. One is on the 8th of October when there's a gibbous moon, and that's visible from late evening. So get out there and have a look at the eastern limb of the moon, or should I say western limb of the moon. And then on the 4th of November, there's another opportunity, but I'll remind you come November, and then another one on the 28th of December when we'll be able to see that as well. So get out there on the 8th of October when the moon comes up and have a look and see if you can see on the western limb of the moon, Mare Orientale, as it's presented towards us a bit more favourably. 14th to the 22nd of November is National Astronomy Week, and it's concentrating on the planet Mars. It's sort of a month later than the actual opposition of Mars, but that's because they wanted families to enjoy Mars a lot more, and of course because they've left it a month, then it will be up a little bit earlier, so we can hopefully get lots of live streaming through the telescope. I'm going to be involved, so just go to the website astronomyweek.org.uk to find out what's going on throughout the country, and you'll be able to enjoy most of this virtually without even having to leave your home. But hopefully we'll get people out there looking at Mars and then being able to see some of these features on the surface. So have a look out for National Astronomy Week events throughout the week of the 14th to the 22nd of November. Okay, 14th of October, the crescent moon's close to Venus. This is going to be in the early morning sky. So here's Venus and the moon, and of course this is Regulus, Leo the Lion over there. And then the next night, or the next morning I should say, the very thin crescent moon will have moved a bit further down, and you see Venus up here and it's really thin crescent moon. And now we come to another comet. This is Comet C 2020 P1 Neowise. You remember we had F1 Neowise earlier in the year, which was absolutely amazing. This is not going to be quite as distinct or as bright, but it should be a really nice object in the early morning. We're only going to see it early morning, so you'll have to set your alarms, folks, I'm afraid. But this is the path. It was discovered in August, so it's not been known very long, but it's heading north. It's in the southern hemisphere at the moment, but it is heading our way. It's around about 12th magnitude at the moment. but it could reach about 6th or 7th magnitude, so just on the verge of being naked eye visibility. So if you've got binoculars or a telescope, you should be able to find it really easy, and if you're able to image it, you should be able to pick that up really, really well. So this is the path of the comet across the sky as we see it from here. So this is the constellation of Virgo, Corvus, Boötes, the herdsman over here with the bright star Arcturus, and of course in Virgo you've got the bright star Spica. So this is the path of the comet coming north, but don't get too excited because this is the sun. This is just before sunrise, so you've got to imagine you have to get out when the horizon is about here before the sun gets too high and the sky gets too bright. So that's where the comet's going to be on the 10th of October. It's going to be very near this Messier object, M68, which is a globular cluster, but we're not going to be able to see that because it's only going to be rising just as the sky gets too bright. So that's going to be a bit too difficult for us. It passes another Messier object on the 16th of October. Now this is the Sombrero galaxy, Messier 104, which is an edge-on galaxy, and that should make a nice sight. So we should be able to see that just as the sky starts to brighten, but you know, that we got more of a chance of seeing that than we have the other one. And then by the time we get to the middle to the end of October, that's going to be the best time to view the comet. So that's when it's going to be at its highest and furthest from the sun, and it's also at Perihelion, which is closest to the sun, and it's not that far from Earth either. And then November it starts to slip down. It's near this cluster of galaxies associated with a galaxy called NGC 5434, and then of course it starts to get a bit lower. So as you go towards Christmas, you can see that it's really, really low, and although the sun will be a little bit further down this way, by that time it's going to be really difficult to see in the morning sky. And that's near the globular cluster Messier 5. So let's have a look at the top part of the orbit where we're going to see it at its best. So this is where it will be about 24th of October at 5:30 in the morning. So there's the 18th of October, and then the 24th of October, it's almost at its highest. So that's when it's going to be at its best. It rises about 20 past 4 in the morning. Sunrise is about 6:25, so it's about 2 hours before sunrise, so we have a decent chance of getting a dark sky, and so we can capture that before it gets too bright. So mid-October is perihelion, and it's only 0.7 astronomical units from Earth. So that's 0.7 the distance of the Earth from the Sun, so that's 0.793 million miles, and I don't know what 0.7 of 93 million miles is, but you can work that out for yourself. So here it is on the 1st of November, and then the 15th of November it starts to slip back into the twilight again, so we're going to lose it. So we've got a window of a few weeks to catch the comet at its best. But whether we're going to get another treat like this, I don't think so. This is a beautiful naked eye comet. Managed to get a reflection of it in graphene water and some really nice views through the telescope, but it's definitely not going to be as bright as Comet 2020 F1 as this one was. This is Comet 2020 P1 Neowise that's going to be with us in October, so keep a lookout for that one. On the 21st and 22nd of October, we got the maximum of the Orionid meteor shower. So this is a meteor shower that seems to appear from near the club of Orion. So there's Orion's belt, the 3 distinct stars here. You've got the white star Rigel, you've got the Hyades up here, and you've got the red star Betelgeuse over here as well. And if you trace those meteors back, they all appear to point to this point in the sky, which is why they're called the Orionids, because that point lies within the constellation of Orion. You've got a first quarter moon there, but of course Orion's only really up in the early hours of the morning, so you need to get up in the early hours of the morning to see the Orionids anyway. And it's got what they call a zenithal hourly rate of 20 per hour. Now this means that you might see 20 meters per hour if the radiant, so this point here where the meteors appear to come from, is directly above your head. Now, of course, that is never going to get directly above your head because it's too low down in the sky to get directly above your head. It's not that low though when it does get its highest, but you're certainly not going to see 20 per hour. On the 23rd of October, Moon is close to Jupiter and Saturn. So here's the Moon, here's Jupiter and Saturn, still low down in the southwestern sky, just after it gets dark. And you still see the Milky Way quite nicely, still showing up really well. And then on the 31st of October, we've got Uranus, which is at opposition. It's in Aries and it's about magnitude 5.67 or 5.7, so it's just about naked eye visibility. But it looks like a very faint star. And you really have to use a telescope to see the bluey green disk. Here's a very bad webcam image that I took of it some years ago. And here's a monochrome image I took of it, showing 3 of its moons. You've got Umbriel really close to Uranus. It's really overexposed here. But you can see Umbriel, Oberon and Titania around Uranus. And of course, when it's at opposition that evening, because Uranus lies on its side, we don't know why Uranus lies on its side compared to the rest of the planets. There must have been some turbulence in the solar system that caused that many, many years ago. But because it lays on its side, all the moons circle around the planet as if you're looking in a bullseye. So you've got Titania here on the night of opposition. Umbriel is there. Ariel's getting quite close to the planet. Miranda, which is really, really difficult, is there. And Oberon is up there. And so how bright are they? Well, they are really challenging. Titania itself is actually about nearly 14th magnitude. So it's the same magnitude as Pluto, which is really difficult to see. Oberon is over 14th magnitude. Ariel is over 14th magnitude as well. Umbriel is nearly 15th magnitude, but Miranda, this really difficult one here, is about 16.5 magnitude. So they're quite challenging objects. But this was taken with an 8-inch telescope and a monochrome camera, and you can see it wasn't high tech, but you know, you could achieve this if with great care, and even capture 1 or 2 of those satellites would be a great achievement for anybody. Okay, that's the end of the month. So my Sky Diary is available on YouTube and TeamUp, and if you go to star-gazing.co.uk/diary, you can get my TeamUp calendar. Here it is. So it's got all the observing opportunities for however long I put them on. So you can scroll ahead months or weeks or years even, once I get the data in there. But you can also follow the instructions on my website, and you can download the app and you can put that calendar in and you can carry it with you. So like to make these things handy for everybody. So download the app and keep looking up. Okay, before I finish, I'd just like to have a plug for the Virtual Astronomy Club, where we're trying to keep astronomy social during these difficult times. And that's going to be from October on the 1st and the 3rd Tuesdays of the month at 7 p.m. And go to star-gazing.co.uk/VAC, and all details of how to join in are there. You don't need any qualifications to come in or any knowledge at all. Just come in, enjoy the speakers and enjoy sharing astronomy, because that's what it's all about, encouraging people to get involved with astronomy and have fun with it, because that's what it's all about. So I'm going to finish there. So keep safe, keep well and keep looking up.